A ceasefire agreement between the US and Iran hangs in the balance as both sides declare victory.
I think it was a very, very strong threat from the President of the United States that led the Iranian regime to cave to their knees and ask for a ceasefire and agree to reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
A major sticking point in the deal, Israel's continued attacks on Hezbollah. Lebanese officials say more than 180 people have been killed in a massive wave of attacks, as Israel says the ceasefire does not apply to its war on Hezbollah. Iran insists it does, and that the vital Strait of Hormuz will remain closed. The US says that's not what was agreed.
The deal is a ceasefire, a negotiation. That's what we give. And what they give is the straits are going to be reopened. If we don't see that happening, the president is not going to abide by our terms if the Iranians are not abiding by their terms.
The head of NATO, Mark Rutte, says he's had a very frank and open discussion with Donald Trump after the US president again expressed disappointment with the alliance over the war against Iran.
The head of the global airlines body tells the BBC it could take months for jet fuel supplies to recover and ticket prices will rise due to the war. That's coming up on Business Today.
Just a day after coming into effect, the Middle East ceasefire is under strain as hundreds are killed and injured after a large wave of Israeli strikes in Lebanon.
Donald Trump attacks NATO allies over the Iran war, saying the alliance wasn't there when we needed them.
And the cracks in the ceasefire have seen oil prices creep up slightly this morning. So what will it mean for your fuel, energy bills and travel plans?
Turkey says it's arrested nearly 200 people in response to Tuesday's gun battle outside the Israeli consulate in Istanbul. One man was shot dead by police as he approached the building. 2 others were wounded and captured. Police said both were involved in illegal drug dealing. No group has claimed responsibility for the apparent attack.
So we'll take a look at the papers now. The majority of the front pages continue to be dominated by the 2-week ceasefire deal agreed between the US, Israel and Iran. And still it goes on, is the Daily Mirror's headline, along with an image of a burning wreckage in Beirut after Israeli strikes yesterday. The Daily Mail characterises Donald Trump's deal with Iran as a bizarre kind of victory, focusing on the lack of clarity over the Strait of Hormuz, amid reports that oil tankers will have to pay up to £2.2 million per ship to pass through the waterway.
And in the Telegraph, you can see the headline there, Putin mocks Starmer in Channel. The paper saying a Russian warship escorted 2 oil tankers through UK waters in defiance of the Prime Minister's threat to seize sanctioned Russian vessels.
Also tonight, the fragile ceasefire with Iran as Lebanon braces for more strikes from Israel a day after around 200 were killed in Beirut.
Iran's president says Israeli strikes on Lebanon violate the ceasefire agreement. Benjamin Netanyahu says he's ready to begin peace talks with the Lebanese government. What impact is that going to have on the US-Iranian talks? NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has been speaking in the last few hours. He says US allies are providing more support to help degrade Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Allies providing a massive amount of support, basing, logistics and other measures to ensure the powerful US military succeeds in denying Iran a nuclear weapon.
Well, in the Middle East, Israel has issued new evacuation orders for large parts of southern Beirut a day after more than 300 people were killed by Israeli strikes in Lebanon. Israel continues to insist that Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire in the Iran war. Iran's president insists it is. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's instructed his cabinet to open direct negotiations with the Lebanese government about disarming Hezbollah as soon as possible. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams.
Fresh agony for the people of Beirut. No sign of a ceasefire here. Israel has instead stepped up its attacks, warning anyone left in the capital's southern suburbs to evacuate, while it targets what it calls the military infrastructure of Hezbollah. But there have been hundreds of casualties, military and civilian. For the Lebanese government, caught in the middle of a conflict it didn't seek, another plea for the fighting to end.
It's very important for us that there be a cessation of this hostilities, that there be a ceasefire immediately.
Israel and the US say Lebanon was never part of the ceasefire. Iran and Pakistan, which brokered the deal, insist that it is. Hezbollah has been hitting back, firing rockets across the border. Israel says its operation is leaving the group stunned and confused. Amid reports that Donald Trump has asked Israel to scale back its attacks, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he wants direct negotiations with the Lebanese government as soon as possible. But this is a conflict which threatens to wreck hopes of a wider peace. Another sticking point, Iran's stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz. It's still not properly open. Iran now saying it wants the world to recognise its sovereignty.
This body of water is Iran's territorial water. You know that this Strait of Hormuz is purely in Iran's territorial water, Oman and Iran. So this is what, by goodwill of Iran and Oman, we're actually allowing everything for the safe passage.
In Mumbai, a tanker carrying liquefied petroleum gas arrives after passing through the strait in the last couple of days. Iran says vessels must now use new routes to avoid mines. The Prime Minister is still touring the region, telling Gulf allies Iran should not hold the Strait of Hormuz to ransom. Britain among several countries searching for a diplomatic solution. NATO's boss, fresh from what he called his very frank conversation with Donald Trump, says the alliance is ready to help.
I know the President is very keen on making sure that the sea lanes are open as soon as possible. But this is practical support. One, with the campaign itself, and now in the next stage to make sure that this principle of free shipping is maintained.
In Islamabad, preparations for this weekend's crucial talks. Despite the yawning gulf between the US and Iran, Pakistan says there's a growing hunger for a way out.
It was not there 37, 38 days ago. Pakistan and our leadership has played a very key role in bringing about this desire. So you have this desire. I'm very hopeful this will reach fruition into something concrete.
In Tehran, commemorations to mark 40 days since the assassination of Iran's former supreme leader. The current regime says it's ready for a deal, but still sounds defiant. Paul Adams, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Lebanon now. Hugo Beshega is in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, for us. And what can you tell us about possible talks between Israel and Lebanon?
Yes, Sophie, this is very significant because it could pave the way for not only the end of the war between Israel and Hezbollah, but also for possible diplomatic relations between Israel and Lebanon. So we still don't know how this process is going to work. Israeli officials are suggesting that the attacks here are going to continue. So this could be part of a policy that they often describe as negotiations under fire. If that's the case, this would be devastating and possibly unacceptable for the Lebanese, because the president here has been saying that this is the main option they have, direct talks with Israel to try to end the conflict here. Now, Sophie, today it was a day in which a lot of people were still in shock here in Lebanon after those horrific Israeli airstrikes. A country that is usually divided has been united by the pain and the anger following those attacks. One of the deadliest days in Lebanon's recent history. More than 300 people were killed. And hours ago, there were more evacuation warnings issued by the Israeli military for the southern suburbs of Beirut. And lots of families have come here to Martyrs Square in central Beirut, believing that here they will be safe. So the war continues, and for many people in Lebanon, there's no respite.
Hugo Bashega with the latest there from Beirut. Thank you. Well, oil prices have started to climb again amid uncertainty over the ceasefire and access to the Strait of Hormuz. The price of petrol and diesel here has continued to rise, and motorists are being warned that the prices are unlikely to fall anytime soon. Our business editor, Simon Jack, is here with all the details. Simon.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, the wave of relief that swept over markets yesterday as the US and Iran declared a ceasefire has begun to wear off. People are now questioning, has anything really changed? Oil prices have been shooting up since the start of the war. But after the announcement of a ceasefire, look over here, there was this massive drop of 15%. That's the biggest one-day drop in 5 years to around $90 a barrel before it started to creep up again towards $100, although the news of that talks between Lebanon and Israel have seen it ease off just a little bit. Now, primarily, the thing is that nothing much has changed here in the Strait of Hormuz. Plans to reopen it have not really happened. There's been no increase in the trickle of ships. Just 11 main Iranian vessels went through since the ceasefire. We're just hearing the last 10 minutes. There's one non-Iranian vessel that has made it through. But you can see the oil tankers here in red. The cargo ships are marked in green. But most shipping owners see no reason to risk it, with concerns that part of the shipping lanes may be mined.
One of the key questions is how secure is the passing? If it's not 100% secure, we wouldn't even ask our captains to switch on their engines. If there is any danger, no insurance company will insure your ship, and we wouldn't go through the strait without an insurance, right? And insurance costs have quadrupled, or I mean, even more. We pay for an insurance now as much in a week as we pay normally for a year.
And as long as the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively shut, and it could be for days and weeks after, prices at the pumps will continue to rise. Today saw average prices rise again. Unleaded was £1.33 a litre before the war. It's now £1.58, according to the RAC, while diesel was £1.42 before hostilities start. It's now over £1.90. And if you think filling up the car or lorry is getting expensive, try fueling a plane. Jet fuel supplies are particularly tight, which means air travel will get more expensive.
There's almost a direct correlation, if you look historically, between oil prices and ticket prices. So, you know, if the oil price stays high, ticket prices will stay high. As the oil price, particularly jet fuel, not just crude, but jet fuel prices come down, then you would expect ticket prices to start recovering towards where they were. But I expect fuel prices to remain elevated for some months to come.
So while the diplomatic exchanges go on, it's what actually moves through the Gulf. What are the rules of the sea? Will there be tolls, for example? That's what matters for energy prices, which, as we've seen, work their way into just about everything.
Simon, thank you. Well, the Iran war is already having a direct impact, as Simon was saying, on the cost of living, with the increasing cost of fuel and fertiliser likely to push up prices in the UK. The BBC's Your Voice correspondent, Coletta Smith, is in the Lancashire village of Belthorne for us tonight. Coletta.
Yeah, welcome to rural Blackburn. I'm just on the outskirts of the town in a little village, as you say, called Belthorne. And we're here at a community pub right in the centre of this village, owned, in fact, by community members here. We are more than 3,500 miles away from what is happening in Tehran at the moment, and yet people here are already feeling an impact, as people are right the way across the UK. And that's because it's having an impact on fuel costs, on home heating oil, and on food prices in particular. Here, as you can see, it's a rural community directly linked to the farming economy, and that's having an impact on all kinds of aspects, as my colleague Emma Simpson has been finding out.
It's all go. Up and down the country, the planting season is in full swing. Here it's potatoes. Worcestershire is a long way from the Middle East conflict, but farmers like Ben Savage are feeling it.
I bet this takes a bit of filling up, Ben.
It certainly does.
His bill for red diesel has nearly doubled.
With all of our tractors, we're using
somewhere in the region of 2,000 to 2,500 litres a day.
A ceasefire is good news, but his profit margin has already been eroded.
All of this kicked off just before we started planting, and it wasn't forecast into any of our budgets.
It takes an awful lot of energy to produce food. It's woven into every part of our food production system, from powering tractors to packaging food and transporting it. This dramatic rise in energy costs will very likely mean higher food prices on the supermarket shelves.
A short drive away, apple orchards stretch across the countryside.
So this tiny little pink bud is just starting to open up. Then we will have a beautiful crop of apples.
From that
tiny little flower. It's amazing nature, isn't it?
But this needs a lot of feeding, and Ali's fertilisers gone up 40%. It's what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. Ali says she and her fellow growers absorbed most of the extra costs then, but they can't do it again.
It was pretty brutal last time. We can't afford to make a loss. We can't afford to lose our businesses. So it's really important that the costs do go through the supply chain. Sadly, even if it all ends tomorrow, the costs are built in now. They're baked in.
By the time this fruit is ready to be picked, consumers may start to feel the impact. Emma Simpson, BBC News, Worcestershire.
Tonight we are once more reporting from inside Iran, the only British broadcaster to be doing so. We are there amid mounting pressure on the fragile ceasefire. Speaking exclusively to ITV News, a key senior figure in the Tehran government accused the UK of being complicit in Iranian civilian deaths, claiming US bombers have been allowed to use British bases. He also insisted that safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz is open to anyone if vessels communicate with Iranian security authorities, the implication being that the narrow waterway has been mined. The Strait of Hormuz is one potential ceasefire flashpoint. Another is Lebanon, where Israel launched its deadliest bombardments of Beirut since the war began. Our first report is from our international editor, Emma Murphy, in Tehran.
40 days since the start of the war, 40 days since the killing of the Ayatollah. In Tehran today, a rally to commemorate that death and all that has happened since.
We are so sad about this situation, as you know, and even in the world, all over the world, for example, in Gaza, in Lebanon, we are so sorry, so sad about this situation.
There's been a day and a half respite in the bombardment that has gone on here for 6 weeks. There is great relief about that, but there is no great confidence that this peace will last.
Today, Iran's deputy foreign minister told me of the fragility of the peace and how it was almost lost last night after Israel's attacks on Lebanon.
Yesterday was a massacre. Not only there was a war crime, but also a grave violation of the ceasefire which Iran and the United States accepted, agreed upon, and on behalf of all the allies that they do have. So Iran and its allies, United States and its allies, we decided to have this ceasefire to give a great chance for peace in the whole Middle East, as Prime Minister of Pakistan also tweeted and named Lebanon in that. And it was quite clear. And I'm very happy that even Europeans are right now talking about that Lebanon should be and must be included in all the endeavor for peace in the whole Middle East. But anyway, last night was a very critical night because we had no option just to respond to these new atrocities. Then there were few back and forth and few messages through Pakistanis, and we hope that American could control its ally and this time honor their words actually, and being committed to what we agreed. So at this moment that I'm talking, I hope that we can proceed to go to Pakistan.
Scenes like this are now commonplace across Iran. And this strike, where more than 40 people died in a residential building, has called into question Iran's view of the UK's position of defensive, not offensive involvement. The Deputy Foreign Minister telling me he believes the planes which dropped bombs here took off from British bases.
The UK provided bases for B-2 bombers to be used to kill Iranians, to kill kids. Thousands of Iranian civilians and also civilian infrastructures have been ruined and destroyed by these B-2 bombers. So facts telling you if UK was part of this aggression or not.
What does that mean for security and relations with the UK going forward?
It is nonsense that in a war, a country says that I'm not party to this war, but I provide the infrastructure for you to start offensive operation against another country.
This war has highlighted Iran's power on the world economy. Part of the push factor for America getting involved in talks is to get shipping moving through the Strait of Hormuz again. Confirming the strait is now open but mined and only passable with Iranian permission, the Deputy Foreign Minister wouldn't be drawn on the tolls Iran will leverage for passage.
The Strait of Hormuz is open, but of course each tankers and each vessel should make necessary arrangements with the Iranian authorities to be able to securely pass the strait.
When you say about technical difficulties and restraints, I'm assuming you're referring to mines within the Strait of Hormuz.
Including that, there are others, arrangements that Iran made for the time of war, and they are still in place. So we have maps, we have everything that we have to be careful that the safe passage of tankers and vessels and well-being of crews are actually met during this passage.
Very few ships have yet passed through. Who is the Strait of Hormuz open to if you say it is now open?
To everyone.
So
anybody who communicate with the Iranian authority has got permission from yesterday.
This war has changed much in this world. If this pause does not translate into peace, it will change much more. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Tehran.
It's being disputed whether or not the agreement for a ceasefire in the war on Iran extended to Lebanon. Sources tell us that both Iran and the ceasefire's brokers, Pakistan, believe it did. The White House view is different. Israel has certainly been pressing ahead with a massive bombardment of areas of the capital Beirut, which it claims are strongholds of Hezbollah. Over 200 people are said to have been killed in Lebanon yesterday. Tonight, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said he's authorised negotiations with Lebanon. Here's our global security editor, Rohit Kachru.
The escape from Beirut today. When evacuation orders were issued, the roads filled up. What you're looking at here is day 2 of what's meant to be a ceasefire. During just 10 minutes yesterday, there were 100 strikes. Every few seconds, somewhere in Lebanon, the ground shook. From his hospital bed in Beirut, Rabbi recounts what happened. From the first instance, I started saying the prayer before death, he says. He described seeing a flash of light, a body flying over him. He thought he had died too. Today, Israel's military released video of what it said were attacks against Hezbollah command centers. But some of Israel's allies are asking whether these were intended also as strikes against the diplomatic process itself. The talks to secure a ceasefire stretched late into Tuesday night. American, Pakistani, Turkish and Iranian officials were on the phones, relaying messages back and forth between Washington and Tehran. But diplomatic sources have told ITV News that when mediators hung up around 11:15, both the Iranian and Pakistani delegations left with a clear understanding that the US had agreed that the 2-week ceasefire would extend to Lebanon. Washington has since denied that. At 11:32, Donald Trump announced there had been a ceasefire. What he didn't mention were the many concerns that had been deliberately deferred until face-to-face talks this weekend. The Prime Minister of Lebanon met with his cabinet and emerged to condemn what he called a dangerous escalation. Lebanon is submitting an urgent complaint to the UN Security Council, he said. Shortly afterwards, Israel agreed to direct negotiations with his government. Today, officials insist that Lebanon was never meant to be one of those issues left open to interpretation. And with so many other hurdles ahead, the concern is this process could unravel, and soon. Rohit Katru, ITV News.
Sir Keir Starmer has told ITV News' Talking Politics podcast that he believes Israel's attacks on Lebanon should stop. In an exclusive interview with us, he says it is his strong view that the attacks should not be happening. Speaking to our political editor in Bahrain, which he was visiting as part of his diplomatic tour of Britain's Gulf allies, the PM also responded to our story about Tehran, claiming British bases were used by American bombers to attack civilians during the Iran war. Robert Peston asked the Prime Minister for his reaction to the claims being made by Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister.
We are monitoring that very clearly. As you would expect, the principles are in place, really clear about that divide, no offensive action, not joining in the war, collective self-defence only, and that our bases will not be and are not being used for wider offensive, and particularly for offensive on civilians.
So Israel is wrong to be attacking in Lebanon now?
Yes, that shouldn't be happening. That should stop. That's my strong view.
And now here is our political editor, Robert Peston, from Bahrain.
That part of my interview with the Prime Minister, where he dealt with those claims from Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, it's not going to make Keir Starmer's relationship with Donald Trump or Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu any easier. The fact that he basically said he doesn't trust the Americans to only use British bases for defensive action that, you know, that Britain is actively monitoring. What happens, you know, when those planes leave the UK? I mean, you know, Donald Trump is not exactly happy with Keir Starmer right now. And as I say, the fact that, you know, Keir Starmer is saying, you know, he's not going to take America's word for that, pretty interesting, I think. You know, potentially making it even harder for Keir Starmer to rebuild relations with Trump. And then, of course, essentially telling the Israelis that they are utterly wrong to be conducting those attacks now in Lebanon. That comes against a backdrop where relations between Keir Starmer's government and Netanyahu's government are pretty terrible, following, you know, Starmer's recognition of a state of Palestine. So, you know, it was really quite a punchy conversation he had with me.